Hello everyone, and welcome to the fourth masterclass in this series with Women's Network Australia. It's a really fantastic session today, and I'm very pleased to be able to share it with you. We are welcoming Kimberly, who is a member of WNA and is an amazing individual. I'm so glad to have her with us. I'm just going to change my screen so that I can see you all and that you can see Kimberly's slide presentation. So thank you for that. I'm just going to introduce Kim, and then what I'd like you to all do is, if you have any questions along the way, feel free to share them in the chat box. We will have opportunity in this session for you to share and ask questions, and Kim will actually run you through a little interactive activities to help you in your charity focus. So Kim, and you'll be able to tell fairly quickly when she starts talking, Kim was originally from Chicago, but she's been in Australia for quite some time, although we still can hear a little bit of that Chicago accent. She has grown-up children, and she has a degree in marketing and psychology, and obviously a deep love for working in fundraising and philanthropy and the not-for-profit sector. In fact, I think that might have been her first job, but I'm sure she can tell us a little bit about that. So Kim's career has involved certainly work in not-for-profits, but also as a consultant for a number of purpose-driven organisations, supporting their strategy, their vision development, and importantly, their donor acquisition functions. She loves learning herself, as well as sharing her knowledge, and she has done a really important piece of research that she has shared, and in fact that I've shared with many of you through the network, particularly looking at women's philanthropy. And I think that's a really important and growing area, and I'm sure Kim will touch on that today. So as well as being the not-for-profit fundraising guru, she's also Chief Executive Officer of the Australian Gynecological Cancer Foundation. And I'm probably going to muck that up a few times as I say it today, Kim, so you'll have to bear with me on that one. And her vision in that space is to create a world in which women aren't shocked to learn that there are 8 gynecological cancers. And that's news to me for a start. So I hope that you might have an opportunity to perhaps share a little bit about what AGCF do and some of the things that you're looking to help our community with. So in this masterclass, please take the opportunity to learn from Kim's experience and knowledge about the importance of relationships, of connections, and opportunities to educate, raise awareness, and importantly, raise money for charity. I'll hand over to you, Kim.
Well, thanks so much, Cheryl. And I'm very grateful to you all to be here with you today and to share some thoughts around philanthropy. And grateful to the Women's Network who provided me with this opportunity to share some information with you. And I think during COVID, as Cheryl said, when I did this research project on the role and influence of women in Australian philanthropy, I really learned the importance of how women are giving, but they're not talking about it. So we'll talk about that a bit today. So I've approached today's session kind of from 3 perspectives, talking a bit from a donor perspective, a not-for-profit perspective, and then from the whole female perspective. So I hope the information isn't too overwhelming, and please, questions at any time. So as Cheryl said, I've been in Australia for about 30 years and have spent most of my career as a consultant to not-for-profits, helping them become sustainable, helping them reach financial goals, helping them define the difference between fundraising and philanthropy. So these days, when I go into an organization, because I am still consulting as well as the CEO role, I ask the question, do you want to fundraise or do you want to create a culture of philanthropy? Because there is a difference. Fundraising is you've got that goal, you've got that target, you just want to raise the money. You don't care about the philanthropy side of things, which is all about relationships and keep taking those donors on a journey. So, what are we going to cover today? I'm going to move everybody's faces so I can see my screen. We're going to learn what it means to be a philanthropist and kind of unpack that word philanthropist. Understand the role of philanthropy in the not for profit sector, and then talk about more in depthly what is a culture of philanthropy. So I've just said it's about creating relationships. Fundraising is intertwined in it, but it's all about the relationship. And then understand how women engage with philanthropy. It's completely different than men, and that's okay. And then we'll talk about how philanthropy is changing, especially since COVID. At this stage, looking at that list, is there anything that you'd like me to cover that's not on that list? If so, just pop it in the chat box. Okay. So let's firstly look at philanthropist. When I did my research project, I spoke to hundreds of women, and none of them related to the word philanthropist. First of all, it's not an easy word to say. Second of all, it's kind of, it goes back thousands of years that the weak or the strong have been helping the weak and the rich have been helping the poor. So we've always been kind of in a community where others are helping each other. But in today's modern world, when you say the word philanthropist, what does that conjure up? It conjures up, something maybe from the 1800s of, an old white male smoking a cigar with a top hat on, and, that's the person who you go to for the donations. Today, a philanthropist is defined as someone who's giving their time, talent, and treasure. So the 3 T's. Time is the volunteering, the talent, and whether you're doing that on a pro bono basis or you're on a board providing your, financial expertise or marketing expertise or whatever it might be for that organization, or you're sitting on a committee helping organize an event. That's all expertise. That's all part of volunteering. And the treasure bit is the financial or the in-kind gifts. Now, a lot of people in the sector will say, no, philanthropy is all about the money. And it's not. To be a true philanthropist, it's to give the 3 T's. And in the research project, I was having a discussion with one lady, and I would always start off the discussions by, how does it feel to be a philanthropist? And she'd say, oh, I'm not a philanthropist. Okay, we'll come back to that. So then we'd go through everything else, and I'd come back. I'd say, so now that you understand what a philanthropist is, how do you feel about it? And she said, oh, you could see the body language change. And, oh, yeah, okay, I guess I am a philanthropist. Maybe I should talk about it more. And I'm teaching my kids, but they're not quite there yet. I'm like, okay, what are the kids doing? Oh, they volunteer for this organization or that organization, and they give, but it's only like $25. And one's got expertise in this, so she's doing pro bono work. And I said, Liz, they're philanthropists. And she went, oh, yeah, I guess they are. I said, it doesn't matter the number of hours they're spending, the amount they're giving. They're recognizing that the community needs people to look after each other and to help and to provide those 3 T's. They're doing it. So, why is it important for not-for-profits to build philanthropy? We have so many not-for-profits here in Australia, and they're growing daily. And during COVID, they grew immensely because people were pivoting. They're going, okay, I can't do my job. I've always wanted to do this, so I'm going to set up a charity. The problem is there's a lot of duplication in the sector. So a lot of um, people trying to raise money for basically the same thing. Now, in my role as CEO of Cheryl, make it easy for you, just call it AGCF. In my role there, one of the first things I did as CEO was contacted all the other organizations, not only in Australia, but in New Zealand, the US, and the UK, to say, we're all after the same outcome. So why aren't we collaborating? Why aren't we collaborating and putting money in together into research, so that if it costs $100,000 for something, we could put 50 in each and then have another 50 to go do something else, so that we're having a bigger impact. And they were, not-for-profits tend to be very territorial. They want to protect their donors, which I have no discrepancy with. But when it comes to impact, donors want to see impact and they want to see collaboration. So what's the difference between a not-for-profit and a company, basically? It's the not-for-profit organization doesn't operate for profit. Doesn't mean they cannot make a profit, but if they make a profit, that profit goes into more programs or whatever it is that they're doing, rather than in the pockets of their investors. They really depend on donations to help them reach their goals. So whereas the company will invest, the not-for-profit only receives, and they're lucky to receive any government funding if they do. Everything else has to come from donations. So where does their funding come from? So it comes from applying for grants from trusts and foundations. It comes to applying for a grant or a donation from a PAF. And PAFs are incredibly difficult to identify because they're set up as in an investment portfolio, really, with the likes of a JB Ware or an equity trustees. So it's almost a general, here's who we are and what we're looking for, and then that organization will match you up with the PAF if they have an interest. But over 90% of all donations come from individuals. When not-for-profits think about philanthropy, they immediately go to, we need a corporate partner. That's not easy, and it's not where the money comes from. The money comes from individuals who feel a connection with your not-for-profit. And Cheryl said at the beginning, there's a lot of competition. Yeah, there's a lot of competition. The competition's going to continue to grow. And there's never a right time to fundraise because somebody else is always doing something. So what the not-for-profit needs to identify is what sets you apart. If you didn't exist tomorrow, what would be missing from the community? I mean, we're in September right now, and September is Gynecological Cancer Awareness Month. Do you know how many other causes we are competing with at the moment and trying to get that airspace, the social media, attention, all that sort of stuff in a very crowded month? But there's never a right time. So it's all about, what sets you apart? Why are you different? Why are you special? Why should we give to you? Now, the other area where not-for-profits focus on fundraising is, we need a special event. We need to be at the footy, or we need to be doing a fun run, or we need to be doing a bike race. Again, a very crowded space. And what did COVID do? COVID showed that if you're solely reliant on special events, all your fundraising stopped. because we couldn't have special events during COVID. So it's really important that you diversify and that I call them the fundraising buckets, that you have several buckets. So you've got your individual giving, and whether that's monthly giving or major gifts or requests, whatever that is, that's your individual giving. Then you've got your trusts and foundations. Then you've got your corporate. Then you've got your special events. So that if one gets tipped over, you've got the others to rely upon. You know, a lot of not-for-profits just pre-COVID were reliant on what they call face-to-face fundraising, which is when, you know, you're out at the shopping center and somebody stops you and says, "Will you give for the koalas? Here, sign up here." That's face-to-face fundraising. Well, we couldn't do that anymore either. So a lot of evaluation has taken place since COVID, and we'll get into that later about how philanthropy is changing. But as an individual, do you have a philanthropy plan? See, I can't even say the word. So what is a philanthropy plan? Philanthropy simply is an act of goodwill and the desire to help your fellow human beings. That you're trying to solve a social problem, you're trying to make something easier that maybe you've experienced or someone you know has experienced, and you want to solve that problem. NFPs are put under pressure by donors to really watch their administrative costs. So you'll often find, even though NFPs are all about creating that relationship with the donor, often their staff have high turnover because they get burned out because they're doing so much on a shoestring budget. You'll also find that their boards are working boards. They're not paid, they're volunteers, and they do as much of the work as humanly possible to help the not-for-profit. So philanthropy strengthens a community. It supports underfunded causes. One of the shifts that we saw because of COVID was a lot of people went, "I'm not going to give to the big organization anymore. I'm going to focus on my community. And I want to see change in my community and the impact that my gift can make." It's positive for businesses in local communities to be seen as supporting causes. Another shift from COVID was even the big corporates had to sit back and look, well, we've had to let so many employees go. The employees aren't coming into the office anymore. We're working remotely. Their priorities have changed. Their priorities are family, health and wellness, mental health. So as a corporate, what do we do? So we're finding now that they are refocusing and saying, well, what's important to our employees? And we're going to support what's important to them. So it's amazing how many organizations have now shifted and they're supporting mental health. Philanthropy has a snowball effect. Not a lot of people talk about it, especially in Australia, because of this tall poppy syndrome, which we must get over. And, you know, especially in talking to women, they say, "Oh, well, I don't even know what my siblings or my parents, where they give or what they volunteer for. We just don't talk about it." They'll talk about it with their spouse or their kids, but they don't talk about it outside of that. It's private. Well, yeah, okay, it is private. You don't have to tell them how much you gave, but you could say, "Wow, you know what? I volunteered this week for this great organization and it really gave me a sense of purpose. And have you ever heard of them?" And so you can turn it all into a celebration rather than a bragging. Um, and so it's how we approach it. And it's more to celebrate the impact that you're having or that it's having on you. And if you find a cause that you're really passionate about, well, then it helps you build your network and it helps you to find people that have similar interests, similar passions. It's also positive for your mental health. So with mental health being, you know, so high on the charts at the moment in terms of that's where we need to put money into, that's where we're focused on as, you know, a country and a community, is people's well-being. Um, Actually volunteering or making a donation stimulates the adrenaline to have positive, um, give you positive feelings. So by encouraging philanthropy, we're helping mental health. Um, it's also positive for your physical health because it in giving you positive mental health, well, then the physical part of you wants to continue to do good things. So whether that's to go volunteer and you're moving or you feel pumped up, so yeah, I'm going to go for a walk, I'm going to get outside because you're happy. Not-for-profits also need to look at their donors or their volunteers as potential future employees, or even to elevate that volunteer to do something that you might pay an employee for. For instance, how do you produce your newsletters? Maybe you could have a volunteer doing that for you every month, or however often you do it, rather than paying somebody. But you're giving this volunteer something that they could actually put on their CV, and you can be a reference for them. And maybe in future, when you have the funding, you could employ them. Your volunteers and your donors are your voice in the community. They're your advocates. So you, one, want to make sure they're having a positive experience, but you also want to arm them with all the information so that they can help educate the community when they're out there talking about you. And the last thing, and probably this list could be extensive, but the last thing really is when you have volunteers go into an organization, it motivates your employees to look at this person and go, wow, they're here for free doing that. They're giving up their time to come in and just be with us because they love us. Why do they love us? And then you can have a conversation with them, and then it boosts that employee to say, oh, well, I'm actually lucky to be working here. So philanthropy as a whole, those three T's, create nothing but positivity. Okay, so let's get into a little bit of the gender difference here. And this is not across the board. This is generally in what research has showed us. Research shows us that men give because of their ego. They give because a peer tapped them on the shoulder and said, hey, mate, give to this, and I'll give to the cause that you're interested in. And they give for tax benefits. In this country, it's difficult to benchmark male and female giving because of the pay inequity and because the way our taxes is structured. So even talking with high net worth individuals, even though the female is behind all the decision making on where the money goes, the male is credited for it because he earns a higher wage. So the tax donations come out of his wage. So it's a huge problem. We need to solve it to get proper benchmarking, but I'm not sure that's going to happen anytime soon. Whereas women give to have impact in the community and to help and to really look at a cause that they're passionate about. I had a friend whose husband passed away suddenly a few years ago. And she said to me, Kim, we would sit down all the time and go through where we wanted to give. And she said he had his causes, I had mine, and then we had the ones that we come together and give to. And she said, now going through all the paperwork, I'm finding all these organizations that he gave to that I had no idea about. I said, okay, let's sit down and work it out. So we looked at each organization and we were able to link his networks with those organizations. And we said, okay, that's where the peers come into it. He's given because I'll give to you, you give to me, type of thing. So it is interesting. Okay, so I want to take this down to an individual level, not your not for profit, not your company, not whatever, but you individually. So I want to take maybe 3 to 5 minutes, and I want you to list the organizations that you give to. Just think, where did my donations go June 30? What donations did I put in for tax refund? And I want you to look to see if there's a theme. So in other words, are you giving to healthcare primarily? Are you giving to education? Are you giving to community? Is there a particular reason you started giving to those organizations? And is that reason still valid? And then if you look at the gifts that you gave, what was the most effective and what was the least effective? And then we're going to talk about a philanthropy plan. So take a few minutes to do that. And when you've done that, we can come back and I'd like a few people to share if that's okay.
That's helpful. Okay.
That'd be great.
This is so timely for me to get a really good handle on that term philanthropy, because I think the age and stage that I'm at in my life, when I reflect on what I'm doing, what I'm supporting, and why I'm supporting it, it is very much along that path. And I think that's looking back over 40 years as a volunteer and being involved in a lot of different organizations. So for me, I guess the theme really is about that empowerment education for women and girls as a primary. And then, you know, the particular reason is obviously locally, globally, women and girls are very disadvantaged. And for them to be able to access an education at any level in their lifespan makes a huge difference. So I think I really love the hands-on stuff. I love the fact that if I make a donation, I like it to go to the individual or the people that have the hand there for those that actually need it the most. I've, you know, for my past sins, I've worked as an internal auditor. So, you know, I'm a bit over compliance, policies, procedures, and all that sort of stuff. But it really is, you know, you want it to get to where it needs to be so that that's where the greatest impact is. And I think with COVID and certainly some of the impact of floods and droughts around Australia and how much of that money did not actually get to the people that actually needed it the most because of all sorts of different things. That's why I think a lot of us have stepped back and started to look at the kind of charities and other not-for-profits that we're really supporting. I do actually have, I wouldn't have called it a philanthropy plan per se, but, you know, I do have in my will allocations for the organisations that I support.
Chris, you've just gone on to
Just gone on mute.
Chris, you've just gone on to mute. Sorry about that.
It's all right. I think what's really good is that you're helping me sharpen the pencil, you know, on focusing around that. And so the key things for me, scholarships, bursaries, early education, mental health and wellness, domestic violence, homelessness, and ending poverty. Now, that might seem a bit broad, but they're actually pretty well all rolled into one. And it's around, you know, disadvantage and opportunity. And what I've found as I've got older and are not working for somebody else. When I give, I don't get a tax deduction benefit back as such. When I give, it's that sense of, I like to pay it forward, and I like to see opportunities provided for other people to be able to attend or experience things that I've spent a long time doing. So, that access to information is really important. And that's why I think organisations like yours is vital for women, particularly, and others in community. Like, women are the information gatherers. So, and that relationship, you find a relationship, and I find, someone sends out a call, I need help, or I'm trying to do something, you'll find time where there is none, if you've got that relationship and you're engaged with them. And it's perfect timing today, is what I can say. And I'm really thrilled that, Kath, she'll be delighted that I can spread back to her, oh, guess who I was on the Zoom with today. But I'll catch up with you after that. So I'm not going to take any more time. But
Kim, are those themes that Chris talked about, are they common? I mean, I know Chris does probably a lot more philanthropic work than probably the average person, but are those the general themes that you find?
The themes don't so much matter to me as, firstly, women do more research into an organization than their male counterparts. Women ask a lot more questions. They want detail. They want to create a relationship with the organization, and they want to basically become part of the family, and not just here's a gift, hear from you next year type of thing. So, what this exercise was meant to do was really to get you to individually think about, well, where do I give? And is there a theme? And is that theme matching up to my core values and what I believe in, and the change that I want to see in our community? If it is, fantastic. If it's not, then it's time to evaluate where you're giving, and look at the organizations that are going to help you fulfill really your personal mission.
And I think too,
Go ahead.
Kim, it's so much more than just a financial donation. I think what you highlighted with those 3 T's really ticks all the boxes. And I love the fact that as you are asking us to reflect on what we're doing, the big message for me is how well is that being communicated with the things that I'm actually involved in, and reaching out and sharing with other people, because that relationship and that connection is gold. That's actually the real investment that comes back. And as you say, there's probably some enormous work that can be done with the donors and the people that support the work that you're doing, by ensuring that they've got the information that they can talk it up when they're out there telling other people why they are a donor or a philanthropist for different things.
Kim, can I ask a question?
Go ahead. Yeah.
How frequent or regular is it that you might have an organisation on your list that's there simply because it was once on your list and you kind of feel guilty about striking it off, but you really don't feel that connection with the organisation, or you may not have been kind of seeing the impact that they've had, but you know that they're desperate, so you don't want to cut them off?
Yep. Interesting you asked that question. During my research project, I was speaking to one lady, and we talked about the organizations that she gives to. And she said, oh, I give to the Salvation Army. I said, fantastic. Why do you give to them? And she said, oh, I've given to them for several years. I said, is there a particular part of their program that you're passionate about? She said, no, they do good things in the community. I said, okay, like? And she said, I have no idea really, but I'm sure they do good things in the community. And now this lady was older. You weren't going to change her mind. But for me, it would be, well, if I haven't heard from an organization that I've been giving to for a while, then maybe I'll stop giving and see what they do. See if they come back to me and they ask me the reasons. We see that you didn't give this year. Is there a reason? Yeah, there is a reason because I haven't heard from you guys. So you're not showing me the impact I expected. Um, I would have hoped, and I do a lot of what they call shopping around and kind of testing organizations. So you make a gift and you see what sort of communication then that organization has with you.
So you're like the mystery
And
shopper,
or they, yeah,
the
that's it.
mystery shopper of
So
charities.
that's it. So that, okay, am I going to get a thank you and a receipt? How long is that going to take? Is it going to be right away or is it going to be within a week? Or am I ever going to get one? Or do I have to ask for one? And there have been organizations that I've had to ask. Am I going to just hear from them again next year when they need more money? So an organization should be getting to know you as a donor or you as a volunteer. Why are you here? Why do you love us so much? What is it that we do in the community? What differences do you want us to achieve? And so what I do is if I know the answers to those questions and then I see something, whether it's on social media or in the news, that I know is going to be relevant for that donor, I send it to them and say, hey, thinking of you today, saw this, thought you'd be interested. And it could have absolutely nothing to do with our organization, but I know it's an interest of theirs. And that's how you build the relationships.
Kim, can I just come back to the earlier comments about organizations and administrative costs, particularly for not-for-profits and charities, because that's one of the biggest challenges in trying to ensure that you can actually do that meaningful feedback to donors and organizations, because you can't, I think all of us sitting here have been involved, in the sector for a long time, and you know how much personal time you invest that you couldn't afford to pay us what we do. And then when you look at, well, what's fair and reasonable? Should we value people who are actually making sure that that link between the donor and the outcome and the output of what an organization's trying to do is valued? Because a lot of that work is being done by women on top of every other thing that they do. And it's always a little curly question, because you'll get people sort of saying, oh, how much goes to administration? Oh, I want to give to someone that's not doing it. And it's like, are you kidding me? Like, you're burying us women that are, doing a lot of volunteer stuff without an expectation of remuneration. But is it such a bad thing?
Yeah, exactly. I don't think we need to apologize. And we shouldn't feel that we're put in a position where we have to fudge the numbers or apologize for what we are spending on administration. Now, the general rule is it should be under 12%. If you can get under 10%, even better. And you look for the things that you're spending money on, where can you get it, either pro bono or by a volunteer? But again, even relying on that is unreliable, because those people have other things they're doing in their life. So I think to sit down with a donor and just say, if they ask the question, say, yeah, we spend, 9.5% on administrative costs because we have to do this and this and this. We have to have a website. We have to have, a database. We have to pay our CEO. We have to, these things are important to run as a business. And they get it.
Yeah, I think there's some interesting analogies around some of the bonuses that CEOs get paid in particular. And while Squatters is not a not-for-profit or what have you, there's some very interesting correlations around how some things can be justified at one level around an increase in someone's wages at the expense of the ones that are either not paid or lower paid, or the ones that are physically doing all the work. And it's always a very interesting analogy around how people perceive that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And Kim, the opposite was true. You know, we've been watching the Celeste Barber case play
Yeah.
out with the bushfires, where
Mm-hmm.
that was an individual who was trying to do the right thing to raise
Mm-hmm.
money for bushfire victims and the fire services, and it ended up being quite a messy, nasty case where I think a lot of donors would have felt disappointed that what they thought they were giving to didn't turn out that way. So is
I'm
that
not sure.
sometimes?
Yeah. Listen, I think it was a bit of really goodwill and naivety on Celeste's point of, side of things. But I think donors weren't regretting that they gave to that. What they were regretting was the system.
Mm,
That's what they were disappointed in. And they were also disappointed in the big organizations who said, who where the money didn't get to where it was supposed to go. And those organizations came out and said, oh, yeah, well, we're saving that for the next disaster. Yeah, no, sorry, that doesn't work, which is why people have changed their focus to be more community oriented. So, yeah, there have been a few lessons along the way. And, poor Celeste, that was again, just she didn't do the research into, how she could distribute the money.
I
So,
think also, in fairness to her, she had no idea that it would be as successful as it was,
yeah,
really. She
exactly.
just was
Yeah,
trying to do the right thing and it really
yeah,
snowballed. But listen, I
yeah.
know we've taken you off on a bit of a tangent, so
That's okay.
I'll let you go back to your slides.
Okay. So let's spend the next few minutes talking about a philanthropy plan. So what does that look like? It's really three objectives. It's the what, where, and how. So what do we give? We give our time, talent, and or treasure. Which one are we going to give? Where are we going to give? And how are we giving? How, in other words, what we're giving is going to make change. So we break this down in creating your roadmap, and we call it radar. We reflect, so explore your values. What's important to me as an individual? Assess where you've been giving. That's what we've just done. Decide if that list really matches up with your values and defines where you want to give and what you're doing. And then act. Do your volunteer work for the same or new organizations. Volunteer for a board or a committee. Give your financial gift. And then in a year, look at that again and say, how do I feel about those decisions? Did they work out how I hoped them to? Do I need to refine it more? So we give to organizations that, kind of get us up in the morning. They put a fire in our belly. That means a lot to me. I want to really make a difference there. And we have to focus on both the internal and the external motivations for giving. So, what are the external influences? Is it more disaster giving? Is it more, um, what's happened in the community? But are the internal factors more health or education or, equal opportunity? Things that really stir me, and I want to make sure that those are the areas I focus on. Experience is going to motivate us to give. So, especially in health sense, um, if we know somebody, say, who's experienced a gynecological cancer or who, um, has had an illness, then we're probably going to focus our giving in that area. So, quite simply, being a philanthropist is just wanting to create a better world, to do things that are going to create a better world for the next generation. Everyone has someone to give, something to give. Sorry, in the interviews that I did, I had one lady say to me, "Oh, I learned my giving from my grandmother. She was always in the community. She'd always have things in her handbag to give to people, if they were hungry or homeless. And she said to me, if you have $5, then you can give away half of that. There's always something to give. And I just thought that was beautiful. Only 35% of gifts are made with any research behind them. So I was saying before that women do a lot of research. They look at, the organization, what they're spending on admin, what they're actually achieving, the impact. It was funny. My kids know June 1st, Mom's going to ask, where are we giving our gifts this year? And so this year I didn't have to ask. They came to me and they said, oh, Mom, we sat down, we did our research, we picked 3 areas that we wanted to give to. We even looked at their annual reports. I was like, fantastic. So it's all about doing that research and exploring, well, what are the best organizations that are having impact in the area that's important to me? And okay, I'll make a gift after I've done my research, and then I'm going to test them for the year and see what they actually do and how they actually treat me as a volunteer or as a donor. But you need to decide what success looks like in your giving. What is it that you want? Some people want to make a gift and be left alone. Other people want to get involved. So, where in between all of that is your success? Philanthropy is a journey, and we change. Don't feel like, well, because I give to this organization today, that in 5 years' time, you still need to be giving to them. Maybe they fulfill what your success looks like, and then you can move on to another organization. So what is it that you can give? You can give your time, your talent, your influence, your networks, your passion, and your money. So it all comes in different forms of what you can give. And then look at it and say, okay, well, what can I give today, right now, immediately? And what's going to have to wait? Maybe I have to build my networks in this area before I can introduce that organization to my networks. Maybe I don't have the skills that they want. So I have to wait for an opening in that area before I can offer my skills. So you need to look at, well, if I want to achieve those goals in philanthropy, do I have all the resources that I need to help an organization achieve that? Or do I find an organization that has those resources that can do it without my input? So there's actually a lot more thinking that can go into your giving than we probably realize. Okay. So then when you sit down and break it down even more, it's okay, if I'm going to give a donation, a gift, how much am I going to give? Am I going to nominate, this is a set amount this year that I'm going to give away? Or is it going to be a percentage from your income? Are you going to do a lot of little gifts? Or are you going to do a couple of big gifts, significant gifts? And do you want to set aside some funds for getting that tap on the shoulder from somebody that says, would you consider giving trying to help raise money for X cause? You can call it a crisis cause or a friends fund, so that you've got some available money there. Maybe you say, I'm going to give away $10,000 this year, but I'm going to keep $1,000 aside for that extra little fund. And what time of year do you want to give? Do you want it all to be in June before the end of tax? Or are you going to, distribute it throughout the year? And then if you look at the volunteer side of things, where do your skills overlap with the needs? So again, like I was just saying a minute ago, maybe you have some skills that an organization doesn't need right now because they've got somebody else doing that. So you say, okay, do I have any other skills that they might need? So it's about having that discussion, or about saying, well, I'm here if you ever need anybody to do that. look at combining your personal passion and hobbies with your volunteer work. Sometimes it's really nice to not volunteer in an area where your day job is. So, for instance, I get a lot of people asking me, "Oh, will you come on board to help us with fundraising?" Depending on the cause, quite frankly, I get so sick of talking about fundraising. Let me do something else. Because, again, it has to be fulfilling for me, and help expand my area of interests or my networks, or um, gets me excited to do something else. And sometimes that could just be stuffing envelopes. So those, in looking at that, then, so is it just general volunteering, setting up for an event, or stuffing envelopes, or or am I going to use my fundraising skills and help them achieve their goals? Or am I just going to do some pro bono work for them to help them, with that certain project? Or am I going to join the board? And if I'm on the board, am I going to be operational? So I'm more or less taking on more work, or am I going to just be strategic? So the main thing with your plan is to make sure that you're happy, that it's mission, and what you want to see changed in the community. And then share that, even if you're just sharing that with your family and teaching them and getting them to participate in philanthropy, and talking about what you do. That sets an example. And that's what philanthropy really is all about, is sharing and setting an example, because then it has that flow on effect like we talked about earlier. Oh, looks like I was in the middle of a thought there when I was doing this. um, yeah, we'll just skip that one. Okay. Any questions at this stage as we move on to culture of philanthropy?
Your thought back then, Kim, might have been around your generosity.
Yeah.
And kind of assessing that, and that probably gets back to the feedback, as you said, from organizations that you have that relationship with.
Absolutely. I was having problems with my PowerPoint before, and it like shut down when I was updating a few things. So, there you go. I thought it saved.
I don't have a question, Kim, but
Yeah.
I think for me, it's just a reflection of what you've said so far, just in particular around, what our expectations are in return from the organizations that we give to. And, when I was reflecting on some of the ones I give to regularly, often it is that kind of, 30 June, here's your summary of what you've given us this year, but you don't hear anything else throughout the year. And it's just that sort of, what am I actually getting for, not that I want something in return, but I don't know how the money's being spent or where that's going. So to be able to sort of reflect on those things and put some more time, I think, into an overarching plan, and doing that research about, who you want to give to and what that is ultimately achieving is worthwhile.
Yeah. Right. Well, that's good. I mean, in my mystery shopping, there was one organization that is quite well known, and I have respect for, and so I gave a gift. And 2 months later, ended up having to ask for my receipt. And because I can't help myself, made a few suggestions how they could improve their program, and got a not so lovely response back. So I went, yep, okay, done.
Wow.
Yeah. Anyhow, that's good. If this got you to reflect on your giving and where you're giving it to, and what you should expect, that's good. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, a culture of philanthropy, what is it and why do we need it? An organization, a not for profit with a strong culture of philanthropy, has a board that is demonstrating by leading. What does that mean? I know a lot of organizations, when I first came out here, would say to me, "Oh, you're just going to tell us how they fundraise in the US and how we should be doing it like them." No, that's not it at all. Yes, they have a strong culture of philanthropy in the US, but then every organization has their own culture of philanthropy. And it is no good for a not for profit to say, "Oh, well, we don't have a culture of philanthropy." Well, why is that? You can't just take it off a shelf and say, "Okay, now we have one." You actually have to look internally and say, as an organization, what do we want to be known for? How do we want to treat our donors and our volunteers? And we have to create that culture. And your culture could be completely different from the not for profit that's next door to you. But you have to develop that yourself. And the board, though, in the US, it's, if you're asked to be on a board, there's an expectation that you will give financially. That's not true here. And so one of the things that I do is, before any organization starts a fundraising campaign or an appeal, I say to the board, well, there's one rule. You can't ask anyone to do what you're not willing to do. So if you want us to go out and ask people to give, then you should be giving as well. Because any one of those people could come up to you as a board member and say, "So do you give?" And they will, and they have. And you can hand on heart say, "Of course I give. I believe in this." And it's not, "I give of my time, so I'm not going to give financially." Sorry, that excuse does not cut it anymore. You must, and I don't care what the amount is. I always say, I don't care. It'll be confidential. We'll keep it quiet, but I want 100% giving around the board table. And I've had several organizations where they say, "Oh, but we've got, a sister or a clergy on the board and they can't afford it." You know what? They could afford $2. Or I've had boards that will pitch in for that person and give on behalf of that person. So it's just understanding that you can't go ask anyone outside the organization to do something you're not willing to do. So that's where board leadership comes into play. And then there's another example of a hospital in Toronto where a potential donor was considering a gift to this hospital. So for 6 weeks, he went to the hospital every day. And he sat in the lobby and he'd stop the janitor, a nurse, a doctor, admin people, whoever, and ask them what it was like to work at that hospital. And he said, at the end of that experiment, he went to the CEO and he said, "This is what I've done. And I have to tell you, everyone basically answered the same. And it was all vision and mission driven. We are here because this is what we're known for. This is what we're going to do. This is what we're achieving." And he said, everyone down to your janitor knew that. So that shows to me the culture in this organization is strong and you're doing good things. So gave them a multi-million-dollar gift. So if you can educate your staff, your volunteers, even your donors to be singing from the same songbook about that vision and mission, and that you're not going to be led astray by the next great idea, that you're going to stay on track. And that's your board's job, to keep an organization on track with vision and mission. The other is valuing your staff. Now, Chris was saying, how much do we spend on admin, and do we have to justify having staff, and aren't we showing that we value people if we're paying them more and all that? Yes, I agree with all of that. But we have to work smart, and we have to give our team the tools to do their job so that they can be a success. If we set them up for failure by not giving them the tools, then we're no better off, and we're just going to have progressive staff turnover. Strong communication. Now, Beck, you were saying, some of the organizations that you were giving to, you don't hear from. It's really important I believe that, and I've got an article coming out in November in Fundraising and Philanthropy magazine about stewardship and kind of shaking up that model, because we're now living in an inclusive society. We're living in a society where women are making the decisions on philanthropy. Women don't want to necessarily be recognized, honored. They just want to see the impact and have change. They want to be communicated with. So in knowing that, how do we change our best practices as not-for-profits? How do we change our communications? It's not all about us, it's about the donor. It's not necessarily even about the donor, it's about the impact that's having. So if I can communicate with my donors about what their gift did, they're going to be happy. Okay. I think I'm going to just skip through this because I've already said that. Yep. All right. Cheryl, you'll be sharing these slides. Yep. Okay. I'm just conscious of time, and
Yeah, we
we've
will.
got a bit to go through yet.
Yep.
Okay. So if we look at women-led philanthropy, female-led philanthropy, some of the myths around that are, well, women don't know how to manage money. They don't feel ownership of the family money. Now that point there is true of the older generation now. So say women in their 80s and 90s whose husbands may have earned the money and they've been kept in a guardianship type responsibility. So they feel like, well, he left that to me, but I need to leave that to the kids or to, and I'm living off the bare minimum, which is why when women then make a bequest, the bequests are quite typically large because they haven't spent a lot of the money. And they don't trust that they're going to have enough for their old age. So they live meagerly. And another myth is that women give less than men. Now, women do give a little bit less than men only because of the pay inequity. If you look at the pay, women are giving a higher percentage than their male counterparts. Okay. So what we have learned through research is that women are very collaborative in their giving. They'd rather come together in a group and say, hey, let's go solve that problem, which is why giving circles are taking off, because they're saying, well, we can fix a few of these problems if we pull our money together and we give as a group. They prefer to work together to solve problems and feel that collaboration, it's better. I think at the beginning I said they really want to see collaboration. So if I, with the AGCF, can collaborate with Cancer Australia to go in on research, that's going to have a bigger, people are going to watch that more because of the collaboration, and they're going to see what they achieved by doing that rather than wasting money and both putting money into that separately. Okay. I love this. Women are not a niche market, they are the market. If you think about, take philanthropy out of it, if you think about who makes the decisions on where the kids are going to go to school, on the appliances that are going to be bought in the house, on the car that they need and are going to drive. And yeah, she may not directly make the decision. You might be influencing the male counterpart to say, oh, wouldn't it be good if, and then then he doesn't, it feels like he's done it. We all know that. So yeah, women are the market. Women prefer stories, not statistics. So if you're able to put a story to the impact that you're having, a story behind your vision and mission, you're going to remember today some of the little stories that I told you about women's giving or about philanthropy than you would any stats. So when we talk about the difference between fundraising and philanthropy, fundraising is very transactional. Men's giving is very transactional. Women's giving is relational. Philanthropy is relational. As organizations, when we get a lead on a potential donor, who do we tend to look into? Do we go for, oh, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, so I'm going to look at Mr. Smith. What does he do for a living? That's what we tend to do. That's what best practice tells us to do. But what we should be doing is looking at both of them, having a conversation with both of them, and making sure she's involved in the ask when the time comes. Now, I did an exercise with a client a few years ago where I met with the parents from a couple of different year levels. And at the end of the conversation, we talked about 3 different areas that the school might ask for parents to contribute to. And so I said, if you had the 3 of these to choose from, which would you consider? I kid you not, 99% of the time, the male would look at the female and say, what do you think? And so then she would pick and say, okay. And then I'd say, okay, so if we were to do something like that, who should I speak to? And he'd say, talk to her. So it's really important that you ask the questions. You're not going to offend them. What you're doing is you're seeking their advice and bringing them into the fold. And it's more likely that the women are your volunteers anyhow, more than the men. And they're going to be around to get the questions answered that they would normally ask. So it's really important to bring her into the mix. So the research showed that women have been introduced to philanthropy through their family and through volunteering. They're playing a lead and proactive role in their family philanthropy and decision making. And they identify social responsibility as the main attribute that they want their children and others to learn from their philanthropy. Now, another quick story. One well-known philanthropy family here in Melbourne, I was speaking to her and she said, when it comes time to Christmas, we have everything we want. Nobody needs anything, because if they need anything, they go out and buy it. And so she said, so we started this tradition a few years ago where we put a bowl in the middle of the table and everyone throws a charity name into it. And then on the day, we pull out one of those, and that's where the money we would have spent on Christmas gifts, that goes to the charity. She said, but before anyone can throw a name into that bowl, they have to tell me first. And she said, then I vet that organization. I go through a list of criteria that I make sure they meet, and then I give the approval for it to go in. And I thought, you clever girl. It's really, really good. And when I told her I wanted to steal that idea, she was flattered and said, but you've been in fundraising forever. Why would you want my idea? I said, well, because it's a good idea. So women want big picture. They want stories. They want emotion. They want conversation. They want to see change and impact. They want details. They want time to make a decision. Don't rush them. Because as soon as they've made that decision and they're committed to you, guess what? They're part of the family, and it's up to you to lose them. They want to be informed, and they want opportunities to engage. So the difference between Australia and the US results show us that Australian women don't talk about their giving, where in the US they do. Here, we're not concerned about recognition, but just want to be informed, just want to be kept in the loop. And here, we're very concerned about organizational waste. But that shouldn't scare not-for-profits. That should just, it's going to make us accountable, but it should just, again, be part of the story. well, we have to employ these people to do these jobs, or we wouldn't be able to tell you this, or we wouldn't be able to have the impact in that program that we want to have. So it's just about accountability. So, how and why is philanthropy changing? How it's changing and shifting here is women are taking a more active role where donations are given and to what causes. Now, it's not to say that that hasn't been happening, but I think over the past, say, 20 years, as women have really entered the workforce and are earning money on their own and having titles and earning bigger salaries, that they're saying, no, it's okay. I can decide where to give my donations. We're going to see the millennials really change philanthropy because they're asking so many questions. They're not afraid to talk about issues. They're not afraid to tackle issues and to hold government or organizations to account. So some of these things that I've suggested, I think is only going to prepare us for what's to come. Because the millennials, they want to be involved. They want to volunteer. They want to see the impact. They want to be on the ground, helping the organization achieve its goals. And COVID, what did that do? Well, I touched on it a little earlier, and that was from the corporate perspective, they're now looking at what's important to their employees. And we may see more matching giving. We may see corporates shift a bit to say, okay, well, from the employees we have left, here's what's important. And so here's where we're going to shift our giving. Trusts and foundations during that first year of COVID recognized that not-for-profits were going to struggle. So what happened overall in the sector is trusts and foundations overcommitted, or they committed money that was going to be for the following year into that first year of COVID. So we're going to see the flow-on effect now that they don't have the money to give away that they had during those years. They've got to catch themselves back up. In individual giving, I think, one of the themes that we've seen today is that individuals are just asking more questions. They're probably going to give to more community-focused organizations. Organizations have a lot of work to do to build trust again. But it hasn't affected the industry. It's like, okay, that organization did that. I'm going to find one that doesn't do that. So it's just making sure that, when you're looking at, well, why do we exist? What sets us apart? We may be doing, the same kind of thing that another organization is doing. Let's have a conversation with them about how we could collaborate. And then we can show our donors that we're not wasting money, that we're trying to have the biggest impact that we can have. Okay. I feel like I've talked at you for way too long. Thank you all very much for your attendance today, for your attention, for your questions and comments. Are there any other questions?
Kim, I know we're about to get a flood of questions actually, so I think I'm going to get in first, as is my right.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to pick up on what you said about millennials, and I'm wondering if there's any correlation between philanthropy involving young people and activism involving young people, and are they seeing, and I'm thinking particularly around environmental campaigns and not-for-profits, where they're not only wanting to potentially give the teas, but really actively embrace and be physically part of a change.
Absolutely. I think, well, the millennials are going to be more actively advocating for change at a government level. But if they can see a not-for-profit is either going to help that or is actually having change, then they'll get involved. So yeah, with them, it's a whole kind of systematic change, as well as, well, that's where I'll put my time and effort into.
I might call on Alex Givney and Ronnie, because I know they're obviously working very much in that space on a day-to-day basis, and probably took, like I did, copious notes. But really interesting to reflect around the concept of a philanthropy plan and your own giving thought processes, and then flipping that as the person running the charity, and what, how do you reverse engineer that process? Ronnie, you might have some thoughts or questions.
Oh, I don't know. It was very interesting. I've got a lot of information out of it. So thank you so much, Kimberly. It was wonderful. Yeah, it's interesting. It's just a different, to put it in the other perspective, and how, just looking after the philanthropist, that's for sure. Like how you can embrace them and sort of nurture them a lot more than what we do. It's, I don't know. It's just a really difficult process, and I guess our charity is a little bit different because it covers such an array of people, looking after so many different carers. Obviously, we sort of cover, like a lot of. We're just finding that it's really difficult to get that message out there for people to understand it, because if people are affected by a condition, or something that's their mum or dad's had cancer, they'll donate to Cancer for Cancer, or they'll donate to whatever condition that they've been affected by. But to try and get them to understand that the carers are the ones that are actually the ones that need the support, that's where we're sort of getting a lot of difficulties getting that message out there. So it's very broad. How we bring that back in and try to get them to resonate with that. That's what the challenge that we're sort of facing at the moment. I don't know really what to say, Cheryl. I don't know.
I'll let Kim.
It's an interesting one. If we do our own personal philanthropy plan and we understand all the steps involved in that, and then, like, for instance, even if I get a donor who's donated $25, I either email them or call them and say, try to understand where we fit in the big picture of their philanthropy plan. Why did you give to us? What motivates you? What would you like to see us achieve? And have that conversation, so that you never know what you're going to unveil. And you may find a potential volunteer, you may put, all sorts of things. So, but when they get a phone call from either a board member or the CEO of an organization that wants to have a chat, it's kind of sets them back and goes, oh, a board member just rang me. So again, it's all just about that relationship, making the time to, if it weren't for those donors, you wouldn't be able to do what you're doing.
True.
So yeah,
I mean, I can see the big picture plan. I've got the vision, but to get other people to understand that's the challenge, I guess.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but that's great. I mean, reaching out, the personal touch, I think that really does make it a lot more personable, and we get people to understand their perspective and why they do it. So that gives us a lot more direction as well.
Yeah.
Alex, did you have any questions there for Kimberly?
I'm not sure if my sound's working properly. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, perfect. Thank you, Kimberly. I've just, in the last few years, I've taken on a philanthropy role coming from a teaching background, and I was lucky enough to have Cheryl on my board in the beginning. So Cheryl's given me lots of guidance in this space. But I think probably the thing that really resonated with me today was the building the culture piece. That's what we're working on at the colleges, and Cheryl's been a big part of that journey. And I think we're starting to make some progress, which is great. But I think the board demonstrating was a big one for me. Like, I've got lots of really wonderful people on my board, and they've all got strengths in different areas, but I'm really thankful that I've got several members that are really strong at demonstrating, which I think is great. I think we're starting to kind of streamline our vision and our mission a bit better, which has probably been a big piece of the puzzle that we had there, but probably wasn't clear enough. And I think we had a recent strategic planning day, which is great. probably the bit we need to work on the most at the moment is the structure and the processes. We're still kind of working through that piece of the pie, especially with database work. And I find that's probably our biggest issue. Two colleges, two databases, they don't talk to each other. They're separate, but then we've got donors that are on both databases. So that's really interesting in itself. And the communication piece, which we're getting better at. But again, that comes back to the processes piece as well, having those processes in place that are consistent and working. So for me, I think just hearing you say that it's explicitly as that has been really good for me to take back to my board and say, I came to the session today. This is what the specialists are saying. This is where we need to be putting our energy and our time and our money. So I think for me, it's more just about that we are making the progress that we need to make, but probably streamlining things a bit better is really important too. I didn't have any specific questions.
Maybe Kim, do you have any comments around that process piece? Because yes, databases, CRMs, they're kind of they're the never-ending story. I think probably with most organisations that rely on that relationship piece. Do you have any silver bullets that you can share there?
I think it's important that before you go out to, like, for instance, when I start working with a not-for-profit, I always say, all right, we're going to start at the end. What's your stewardship plan? So if a donor were to walk in today with $5 or $500 or $5,000, how are you going to treat each of them? So we start there. So let's build your stewardship plan, and then we'll go to the beginning and talk about, okay, how do we engage, cultivate, and then solicit? But it's to make sure, yes, that we have a database that we can input all this information in, and make sure you're only storing factual information. We've got our receipt and thank you process in place. We've got all our policies, all the governance in place. So then we can comfortably go out and start having conversations with potential donors, so that all that background work is already in place, and then you can do your job. But it does take time. And CRMs, listen, it's all about what functionality do you need, and what's your budget. CRMs don't have to be complicated. I got a CRM for AGCF and it was up and running in a month. So it depends what you need.
I think too, it's one of those things that, and certainly in Alex's case, I know it's happened before with, and probably those, school-based and alumni-based organisations. Volunteers in that space are really easy to come by because it's not difficult work. It's very time consuming and very valuable to the organisation, but it's certainly something that volunteers can feel they can contribute.
Absolutely. Schools offer a lot of volunteering opportunity. But you also have to, the not-for-profits can just say, well, where are we spending our money? And where can we outsource, for volunteers or offer pro bono opportunities? The number of companies offering pro bono opportunities there was was she Brisbane or Sydney based? I want to say she's potentially Sydney, but it was a PR company. And she said, I was sick of working in the PR model. So during COVID, I opened my own PR agency. I will take 50% paid work. The other 50% is pro bono work. So all you have to do is ask the questions, of companies. Do you guys do pro bono work? The social media company that I have doing AGCF, I had two girls, quite qualified, doing our social media, but it was kind of like, outside their day jobs, and it wasn't happening as fast as I wanted things to happen. And one of our corporate partners put me onto their social media company, and to work out how we were going to collaborate. And the social media company started just asking me questions about AGCF and that sort of thing. And they said, well, do you have anybody doing your social media? And I said, I'm doing it at the moment. I've got no budget for it. And they said, do you mind if we come to you with a proposal? And I said, well, you're more than welcome to come to me with a proposal, but I have no money. So they came to me with a proposal, totally professional. And I rang them and I said, this looks fabulous, but am I missing something? Because there's no cost in here. And they said, no, we want to do it pro bono. So for the next year, I've got them in there doing a fabulous job, and they're just treating us like one of their clients. So yeah, again, it's all about that relationship and asking the questions and just getting to know people.
We are out of time today,
We are.
but I know that you probably have more questions. We will circulate the slides to those participants who've been part of today's masterclass, and I'm going to speak on behalf of Kim and say, look, if you did have any specific questions, I'm sure Kim, between her many other commitments, would happily connect and share with you if she can. Kim, I also would like you to mention your website and the fabulous resources that you've got on there so that people can find out more information. Your blogs and so forth are so incredible and really valuable.
Oh, and not a problem. So my website is just kimberlydownes.com. And on there, I've got articles that I've written on different topics in fundraising, as well as the whole research paper on women's philanthropy. And my contact details. So if you want to get a hold of me, or just message me through LinkedIn or through the Women's Network Facebook page.